What I want to double click on is I have encountered a lot of PMs in Bangalore where you are who were laid off maybe 1 to 2 years ago and they haven't found a job yet. What is going on?
Sure. So I think there are two aspects that I always keep speaking about, right? The first thing is that in capital markets also follow a cycle, right? There's a short-term cycle and there's a long-term cycle. In general, in the long term, if you look at like 3 decades or 4 decades, the funding, the investment into new areas, cybersecurity, maybe EVs, maybe internet in general, has gone up. But those cycles are very remnant. They are like 7 year, 6 year cycles where funding will go up, then it'll go down, then it'll go up, right? In most cases, when there are a lot of funds in the market, right, people generally have an understanding that, oh, I'll hire a product manager with a certain kind of attributes. Somebody's sharp, articulative, has attention to detail, and over time I'll figure out what's the value that they will add into the ecosystem. Maybe like it'll take 6 months for them to really establish them into the company and start adding value there, right? That doesn't happen in funding out cycles, right? It is somebody that you want that has those acumens today, right? So a lot of people, what they essentially understood that there is a process, there's a method to the madness. Maybe there are 3, 4 types of interviews that really happen, right? Maybe something on product sense, maybe on analytics to a certain level, maybe a behavioral interview. And they keep prepping about that without kind of going deeper in why that question is asked. What's the context in the other person's mind? And once that pattern fails, you're generally not considered good enough to essentially lead pivotal decisions in the company because you already don't have funds as a founder, right? So that's a choice that you have to make, that I want a really, really good person. And that's exactly what's happening because this role is super glorified. Everybody looks up to this person and they feel that there's just these 5, 6 levers that you have to do. Like I generally keep saying this, that around 4 years back, 5 years back, I was the first person or probably one of the first few PMs in India who talked about building a portfolio, right? But again, what's happening today, 5 years down the line, it's the same damn case study, which is regurgitated at every place with no depth to it, right? I keep telling people, how do you build a portfolio in 8 weeks, bro? In any program, in anything that you do, right? It took me 10 years to essentially build that across, right? So the only thing that one of the things that people keep lacking and not cracking these interviews and is the sheer fact that you have to deal with ambiguity and deal with intent, right? That if you essentially give an interview and you fail, do you have the retrospection ability to go back and start thinking, where is my competency gap and what is the ideal competency they're looking at? That path is in most cases not clear, and whatever they hear in sheer frequency on the internet, oh, you do this, or you do that, or if you understand system design well, right? That makes just sense for them, and then they say, oh wow, I've applied somewhere, nobody's responding, or the interviews are not going as well. It is the sheer fact that you go down inside yourself and say that a problem leads to skills. Skills don't lead to a problem. You essentially go inside, understand how the system works, and then essentially decide, oh, design is where I want to really improve, or engineering is where something I really want to do well. I think that intent, that discovery of thought has gone for a toss, right? And because so many people got enamored because of the previous cycles that PM is such an amazing role, everybody wanted to jump in, right? And now they're miserably failing, right? And that is when I keep speaking in my videos that first try to understand what do you want to do this. What makes a problem solver a good problem solver? Ask questions on how do I think? How do I do better over there? And if you improve that depth, then the skills will follow, right? That is sheerly lacking in the country. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one component on the job seeker side. I think there's probably also a component around the hiring side where Indian tech startup founders almost beefed up their PM teams too much. And it seems like, based on the data, it's like specifically in Bangalore, it seems like there was just too much of a hype cycle in 2021, 2022.
Absolutely. I think because of it was just sheer about the fact that the funds raised, right? Because people felt that the easiest way is to just hire people and put them into a central role and things will happen. Like, I'll give you a very good example. One of the very good local content startup in the country, which is a $1 billion company, they had like a 50-member PM team. And I was like, wow, why do they need 50 PMs? Right? And this was amazing to me. And the funny part is that at most places, it was all about, because they were so beefed up with funds, some moonshot project which not, no commercial viability around it, no PMF around it, and you put somebody sharp from an IIT or an IIM saying solve this and you're a PM, right? And even if that doesn't happen, you have so much money that you really don't care for 6, 8 months, 9 months. And when the investors come to you and they start telling you, no, this does not make sense, we will not give you more funds, you cannot beef this, you cannot continue this, that is the first fat that they remove. Right? That we tried this, and that is why people find it very lucrative, because whenever they go into this ecosystem and they talk about, oh wow, I'm working on this very cool AI-driven, blockchain-enabled product, right? It sounds very cool. It sounds very amazing, right? But I think people have to see the ground reality, that what is the impact I'm trying to, and most PMs generally fail to articulate what they've done over time, right? What is the one problem that really stood out? Right? And they actually built something which so many users are using. So I think that is a very, very strong indicator that hiring is a function of where you see you're placed as a founder, right? And they think that hiring more people typically fixes the problem, but it is the growth of talent within the org, which at most places does the trick. Yeah.
Okay. And of people out there, you probably work with the most aspiring PMs from these IITs and IIMs. What's your sense of the market today? Has it picked up from the last year where it was really bad? Has AI helped buoy the amount of roles? What is it looking like on the ground right now?
I think the market is improving now. I think a lot of my students have recently moved into PM roles, especially consumer roles. And that is currently happening. The sheer reason, because I think the narrative has moved from growing at all costs to more profitability. Founders have pivoted a lot. They've understood the role in slightly more detail and understanding that what is the value that, and I think there are clearer KPIs which I can see nowadays. So they are like kind of very clear about that, what are the variables that they look into a person to essentially become a good PM. And that has been happening because it is the ecosystem shift that is happening for probably for the next 2-3 years. Any of the VC firms that I talk, like Matrix, Nexus Venture Partners, all of the people are essentially moving towards how do you build a very kind of, that's the word that they use, a zombie business, which keeps generating cash flows, right? And I think there is where a lot of hiring is actually happening. It's opening up. But once again, I think the core thinking that today also is there is not a lot of clarity about what the role entails. I think that might be slightly different. What do you think? Is it very different in the West when people look at hiring PMs, right?
I don't think so. So I think there's this narrative out there that like India is on some totally different track for product management. But I would argue that the track India is on is very similar to all of the second tier cities in the US. So basically, if you're not in Silicon Valley, but if you're in Seattle or New York, you're living the same life that a PM in Bangalore is living, which is like you hear these best practices coming out of Silicon Valley and they make you seem like you're inadequate because you're a feature factory or you're not empowered or who knows what. But in reality, that's like how product management is majorly practiced in your city and area, and it's totally fine. And so I feel like the places where it's furthest away is actually industry, and it's the same in India and in the United States. So if you look at industry-wise, your pure tech companies, your Razorpays of the world, they do understand the product management role really, really well. Similarly, a Google here in the US, they really understand the product management role. Same with Flipkart in India. All of the best tech companies, they actually have a good product management practice too. When you go talk to Razorpay PMs, you say, oh, was your roadmap handed to you? No, it wasn't handed to me. Like I did problem discovery and I helped to drive it with my empowered designers. And so I think that actually it's the same trends. And I think Indians and Americans tend to like similar content. So they all consume the same content. So if you look at, Lenny's podcast or this newsletter and this podcast, like India and US, those are the big places. Europe is almost, they have like a different practice and different way of saying things. Americans and Indians, we're brash, we're direct. And so I would agree 100% that because founders are now becoming more profitability focused and there's more awareness about, well, hey, product managers, they need to be able to drive output metrics. They need to have a ROI. They're leading a team that in the US usually costs about 2 million USD per year. They need to drive 2 million USD also. And so I think that the market is turning around for the better, especially because of AI. And AI in the US has just gone crazy. And everybody I talk to these days, if they're landing a role, it's in AI.
And that is so true, because one of the things so one of my old managers, he always used to say things that if everybody would do interesting things, who will do the boring things? I kind of don't agree there, because the thing is that the boring stuff where you have to give attention to detail, or maybe write a better PRD, or maybe set an agenda for a meeting, or maybe drive some kind of strategic narrative, I think a lot is helpful through AI. I leverage GPT a lot in my content, in the way I teach, in the way I have to circumvent certain problems or certain things, right? So it gives me a lot of time to focus on the deep stuff that I have to do, which is probably read some new thing, maybe understand system dynamics well, and maybe explain a concept. And I think that's a super, super powerful thing. And over time, as AI is improving, I was recently using GPT for having conversations. I was having like moralistic conversations with GPT, and that was so fun, like coming from that side. And so I think it really, really is empowering to the people who show intent. Again, and intent is generally in action. That do you have something to show your proof of work? One of the things that since you talked about, and you also talked about the fact that people are not getting roles because it is the mindset of the funnel that I keep saying that, oh, I'll apply to 100 places, 20 will call me, out of those 10 I'll give an interview to, and the 2 others will probably give me an offer and I'll join somewhere, right? Then where is your intent? That where do you want to go, right? It's what happened through the market. And I think the other way around of building distribution, building a brand, is more about building proof of work, right? That tomorrow I go into a conversation, we both are talking to each other because we have interacted with some kind of proof of work for each other, right? That's why this conversation is happening. And I think that speaks a lot about your intent, your ability to drive outcomes, because nobody's stopping you. Like I keep giving this example to a lot of my students, is that they keep asking me, how do you get so many followers or whatever on social media? I say, can you write for 1,000 days straight? Can you do that? If you can do that, it's as easy as that.